Bet the Board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Furman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast, powered by FanDuel Sportsbook. The day is finally here. It is the final preview podcast for this upcoming National Football League season. I'm your host, Todd Furman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. But before we get things rolling on this fine Monday morning, I want to encourage all of you to go to FanDuel.com, use the promo code BetTheBoard, take advantage of your no sweat bet. That's $1,000 absolutely risk-free for you for a new user. You can bet the NFL, you can bet college football, you can bet anything your heart desires at FanDuel.com. Also, BetTheBoardContest.com. Sign up for our football free roll. Get involved on one of the best free handicapping contests on the internet. Compete with your friends, family, and some of the best under-the-radar handicappers. All right, Payne. The day is finally here. We're talking about one of the best divisions in the National Football League. Are you going to be sad when these preview podcasts are done and we can actually start talking about meaningful football?
These are pretty labor intensive, which I think most listeners know at this point. So I'm ready to get on with it. Let the regular season get here. College football regular season podcast is this Thursday, and then we transition back into the NFL the following week. So I'm looking forward to that, but obviously the AFC West. This is the division everyone wanted. This is the loaded division top to bottom with quarterbacks and high-flying offenses. This should be a fun one.
Yeah, looking forward to it. A little bit more energy and excitement when you look at the four teams in the AFC West versus some of the divisions we've gone through. So 28 teams down, 4 to go, and we'll kick things off as we've done each of the 7 preview podcasts thus far, going in alphabetical order as we try and assess the pecking order in the West this season. And that leads us to the Denver Broncos first and foremost. You're looking at the Broncos 17-1 to win the Super Bowl this year at FanDuel Sportsbook. They're plus 260 to win the division. And as far as their win total is concerned, that number sits at 9.5, shaded to the over at minus $1.35. And quietly, the Denver Broncos have put together the second longest playoff drought in the league behind only the Jets. Pretty crazy to think about a proud franchise and some of the hard times they've fallen on. Nathaniel Hackett obviously takes over in Denver with a more offensive-minded philosophy than what we've seen from Vic Fangio. This is a franchise, though, it's been mired in mediocrity, trying to identify its starting quarterback. This will be its 4th different head coach since they won the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning under center. And when you look at Hackett's track record and resume, I mean, he was the Packers offensive coordinator under Matt LaFleur. We saw Aaron Rodgers go out there and win back-to-back MVPs. And for Broncos fans, they can only hope that Russell Wilson is finally able to win the one individual accolade from his resume. But Payne, when you assess the Broncos this season, some of their weapons, Russell Wilson coming over, is there as much reason for optimism around this group, or do you feel that the market pretty accurately reflects what Denver is going to be on the offensive side of the ball?
You said one thing there about the last time they had success was with Peyton Manning, and that's really the formula and strategy that Denver and John Elway are using here, right? And it won him a Super Bowl, but you look at the age, Russell Wilson turns 34 in November. That's roughly the same age Peyton Manning was when he landed with the Broncos. Now, he gave up a fortune, right? 2 firsts, 2 seconds, a 5th, 2 players 25 years or younger, both selected in the first 42 picks, plus Shelby Harris. So it's a decent amount to give up for Russell Wilson at age 34. I do think Russ can still cook, as the kids would say. To what degree? You know, we'll see. Married dad life has certainly changed him mentally and physically. He's got the old Raymond Felton belly going right now. There's also going to be, I think, this transition process because Denver's the only team in the NFL with a brand new starting quarterback and a brand new coaching staff. And the system Russ was running in Seattle with Shane Waldron is really different from what Nathaniel Hackett ran in Green Bay. The positive here, though, you did mention Aaron Rodgers a little bit there. Him and Hackett got along really well, which probably isn't easy. Rodgers, I think, was very high on Hackett, so I think the Russ-Hackett relationship is going to be a decent one. Kind of getting back to the older version of Russ, when we discussed the Seahawks in our NFC West preview, I believe it was last Thursday, but every day is the same in this life. Was it last Thursday?
Yeah, it was last Thursday.
Okay. I mentioned how Russ was number 1 in EPA per pass attempt on early downs the first 3 quarters last season. That Russ still had the juice to push the ball downfield, 46% success rate on throws of 20-plus yards, despite coming back probably too early with a dislocated middle finger on his throwing hand. If I'm projecting, I think Hackett's going to ask him to play a little bit differently, stay in the pocket more, play in rhythm, improvise less, and that's probably a good thing for Russ as he approaches 34. Last season, Wilson's average time to throw was 21st fastest. He ended up taking sacks, 20 of them on dropbacks where he held on to the ball for 3 or more seconds. So at this age, with a few more pounds on the frame, he's not prime escapability Russ anymore. Still good mobility, but just not peak Russ. I expect Denver's offense to be RPO based a little bit. I think there's going to be some calculated deep shots off conventional play action. I'd expect a little bit more pre-snap motion as well. Packers used it at the 7th highest rate last season with Hackett there. And I think even if there is this acclimation period, there's still 100% certainty the gap from Russell Wilson to Drew Lock is the size of the ocean, right? I mean, Drew Lock was horrific. 31st in accuracy, 29th in success rate, 25th in EPA per pass attempts. All told, Drew Lock graded out quarterback 32 among 42 quarterbacks last season with 125 dropbacks. He was just benched for Geno Smith. Okay, so this is quite the leap.
I can't believe we're getting Geno Smith slander on this Monday morning over here. When you look at the gaudy preseason numbers the professional journeyman put forth.
Did you watch Drew Lock in the preseason game against Dallas the other night?
I did. He should be doing anything but playing football at this point in his career.
I don't know what happened because the arm talent is there. It's just, not all there upstairs, I don't think. You asked about some of the parts around Russell Wilson. I think they're improved. Broncos finished 16th in pass block win rate. Billy Turner, who spent 3 years in Green Bay with Hackett, played the best ball of his career there. I think that upgrades the right tackle position. Turner finished 11th among tackles in pass block win rate. You have Garrett Bowles, Dalton Reisner, Quinn Miners, Graham Glasnow. They're battling out for the other guard spot. It was good to see Lloyd Cushenberry improve in year 2 as the starting center. I think the offensive line has the potential to make a little bit more of a leap this year. And you think about it in this context, because I know you were initially thinking weapons. I'm thinking offensive line because of what Russell Wilson dealt with in Seattle the last 10 seasons. Not once did the Seahawks offensive line grade out as an average pass blocking offensive line in any single season with Russ under center.
I figured that part would be a no-brainer because he didn't have an offensive line before, so by default, he could have taken 5 people out of the stands in Denver, and he'd have significantly better pass protection in this offense.
You look at that 10-year stretch, the average pass blocking finish was 26th. So this is easily the best offensive line Russell Wilson's played behind. Receivers and backs are young with a ton of upside. Jerry Jeudy missed 6 games last year with a serious ankle injury, still finished 4th in target separation versus man coverage. KJ Hamler's kind of the forgotten guy, tore his ACL in September. It was good to see him back in the preseason. Be nice to have him get acclimated a little bit more. Cortland Sutton, another year removed from the ACL tear in 2020. You can tell he feels more comfortable because he's not wearing what looks like a 15-pound knee brace in camp that he wore all last season. Albert O is just a specimen at tight end, 6'6", 260, and he runs 4.5. He was targeted on 24% of his routes last season. Let's see if he kind of runs a few more routes and if Hackett trusts him. I know he was playing a little bit deeper into preseason games than we would have traditionally thought for a starting tight end, but Hackett wants to see him improve a little bit as a pass blocker. Denver did go out and draft Dulcich from UCLA in round 3, dealing with a little bit of an injury there, but it's a nice tight end group there. Running back room, arguably top 5 in the league with Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. Javonte finished 7th in yards created per touch, so the yards Javonte accumulated on runs and receptions beyond what was blocked for him. He was also 6th in evaded tackle rate. I think there's a lot to like here, and I think the kicker, the Broncos are projected to face the easiest schedule of passing defenses and overall defenses this season. Best thing you could possibly hope for when you're breaking in a new quarterback, learning a new scheme under a new coaching staff.
Such an interesting team because you highlighted some of the issues they had last year. You can make the case that if Teddy Bridgewater had stayed healthy and been their starting quarterback all season long, they obviously would have had much better results than needing to go to Drew Lock for an extended period of time. But at this point, when you look at Russell Wilson, clearly a significant upgrade, and Denver obviously in win-now mode. As far as this team defensively, we know they needed to try and go out there and solidify their pass rush this offseason. They did so in the well-documented Randy Gregory drama. Will he be a member of Denver? Will he be a member of Dallas? They also ended up bringing in a couple other pieces that should help. DJ Jones along the defensive line, Kawan Williams in the secondary, and Alex Singleton to help. To your point, you talk about losing Shelby Harris. The biggest thing for Denver last year will be, that plagued them on this side of the ball was health. They lost a ton of man games to injury, but this is a defense under Vic Fangio that kind of built from the outside in. We know what Patrick Surtain is and can be. They've tried to really focus on building the secondary, and if their pass rush gets any better, this is a unit, in my opinion, Payne, that has a long way to go to try and jumping into the upper echelon. But at the same time, they underachieved and were arguably one of the more disappointed stop units across the entire National Football League last season.
You are spot on, and I'm interested to see what the new defensive coordinator does, because Ejiro Evero is the fella's name. He's from Colchester, England, and this is really his first big shot in the NFL. He spent 5 seasons coaching the Rams secondary. The understanding is that there's going to be a ton of carryover from Vic Fangio's defense. Evero is, if you've read some things about him, you hear some of the coaches speak about him, it's very high. He's very buttoned up. He's been lauded for his professionalism and his attention to detail. And he's flat out said that good coaches adapt to the talent they have. So I'm sure there's going to be some uniqueness to his defense, but you look at the scheme and even the verbiage is supposedly going to look and sound a lot like last year. Attack the quarterback, attack the ball, and be situational masters are the 3 calling cards of Evero's defense that he wants. We'll see if that comes to fruition. Now, I think there's a ton of variance with the Broncos defense projecting ahead. On paper, there's a lot of big names. Bradley Chubb, what is he? To this point, the idea of him being Von Miller's replacement hasn't really gone well. Played 7 games last season, had 0 sacks, and admittedly he said it was his worst year as a pro. It's a money year. I would expect a bounce back, but even in 2020, which was Chubb's best year, he got to the quarterback, 14% pressure rate on pass rush snaps. But for his size, you look at a guy 6'4", 270. He's a below-average edge setter in the run game, and he's a horrific tackler. You mentioned Randy Gregory and the drama that went down there. It was a money year last year. Played his best season, 14% pressure rate on pass rush snaps. He's got explosiveness. He's got length. He's super strong for his size. So the traits have always been there, but he's almost 30 years old. He's never had more than 6 sacks in a season. We know the past off-field issues. There's a reason why only 28 of the $70 million contract is actually guaranteed as a variance player. And then you have Nick Bonito, someone I'm familiar with, South Florida kid, has serious potential as a pass rusher, 25% pressure rate at Oklahoma last season. You can use him as a blitzer. My guess, he becomes a situational pass rusher this season, but the word is he hasn't quite hit the ground running in camp. So that trio is interesting of Chubb, Gregory, and Bonito. They have to step up because the Broncos, 27th in pressure rate last season from the moment Von Miller was traded. For the entire season, Denver was 32nd in team pass rush win rate. DJ Jones was signed this offseason to help plug the middle, number 1 in run stop win rate last year. You have Draymond Jones, Mike Purcell, Deshaun Williams. Makes a solid interior. I think the hope is, right, the front 7 can stay healthy this year. You kind of hinted at some positive regression for health there. The Broncos had the 3rd most injured defense last season. Secondary is interesting with Surtain and Simmons. Justin Simmons hasn't played to his 2019 level in recent years, but he's still a do-it-all safety. He's the glue of the unit. Played almost 100% of snaps last season. Kwan Williams comes over from San Francisco. He finished 9th in adjusted yards allowed per coverage snap last year. Kareem Jackson is coming off a down year. Had a great 3-year stretch from 19 to 2020. And then you look at his style, right? He's the one guy that's kind of like a thumper. 34 years old, though. I don't know what's left in the tank. Ronald Darby is just so up and down. I don't know if you can rely on him. I have no idea what to expect there. He was down last year, so maybe this is the year he bounces back up. That's typically how it goes for him. Like I said, there's a lot of big names, just not a ton of elite production yet. And the part that makes me a little nervous, last year, if you're looking at counting stats, not bad. Denver finished 3rd in scoring defense. Now they've added to that talent, so everyone thinks, they're going to surge, especially with a healthier unit. The problem is when you dig deeper, you realize Denver faced the least amount of offensive possessions because their offense was so methodical. On a down-to-down basis, Denver's defense was actually 16th in early down schedule adjusted efficiency, below average on all other downs despite playing an average schedule of offenses. And now this season, year one forever, a really tough job because the Broncos project to face a top 5 schedule of offenses.
That was pretty wild when you were digging into some of the Denver Broncos numbers, at least for me. And I saw that they were 3rd last year in points per game allowed because obviously, to your point, the efficiency numbers don't support that. And the eye test wouldn't either. You never got the feeling that, hey, look, this is a truly elite Denver defense that their opposition is going to struggle to move the football against. But when you're working with such a shorter number of possessions each and every week, you can disguise some of those numbers. And it's a lot of what we talked about in the past for the Dallas Cowboys years ago when we did this podcast, that the key to their defense having success was just staying off the field and the offense being able to do so. You talked a little bit about the strength of schedule in terms of opposing offenses and defenses they're going to face. I mean, Denver's schedule definitely more difficult, at least on the surface, coming into the year. And you try and figure out where some of the challenges will come. Denver better make their hay early in the year because it's one of the league's most difficult schedules when you look at opponents beginning in week 10. As far as how the market has priced them, Payne, have you seen anything that stood out to you as far as their win total movement or anything else along those lines? We obviously know that their Super Bowl odds and AFC division, everything else along those lines in terms of big overall futures picture, those took a major move once Russell Wilson came over, but the win total obviously a little bit more indicative of what the professional bettors feel this Broncos team can be.
Yeah, you're spot on. We did see that movement in the market because Russell Wilson's a massive upgrade over Drew Lock, and that's ultimately the question here. It's like, yes, Denver has improved. Yes, they had to make this move because everyone around them got better. I mean, you just look at their neighborhood, right? Kansas City, Justin Herbert and the Chargers, Derek Carr and the Raiders, all of those teams kind of upped their pizzazz level in terms of offense, and we know what the Kansas City Chiefs can be. I do think it's interesting. I would, in the pecking order of the AFC West, I think you're looking at them kind of in that 2-3 range, and that's really where they're priced within their own division. I don't see anything that says this is going to be the team that comes out and wins this division, but you never know. Maybe Russell Wilson is that good at this age, and he kind of gets, accustomed to the new offensive system, and that's the important part. And I think you said it very well, is they have to make some hay early in the season, and that's the time where they're kind of getting used to this brand new system.
Yeah, it's a combination of things. You'd almost rather play your more difficult opponents when you're breaking in a new system and a new starting quarterback, even one with the pedigree of Russell Wilson. But unfortunately for Broncos fans, not the hand they were dealt, and they'll see what Russell Wilson has left in the tank, recovering, or at least fully recovered from the mallet finger, as he hopefully embraces the Rocky Mountain air. When you go from the Denver Broncos to a team that's been the model of inconsistency to kind of the gold standard, not just in the AFC West, but arguably in the entire National Football League, it is, of course, the Kansas City Chiefs, who have now made the playoffs 7 consecutive seasons. No other team in the NFL has an active postseason streak of more than 3 right now, and that trio includes Buffalo, Green Bay, and Tennessee. When you look at the Chiefs' dominance, they've won 6 straight division titles. It's double the next longest streak in the league, which belongs to the Green Bay Packers. Kansas City has hosted 4 straight conference championship games, the only team and franchise to do that since the merger. And you can understand why. When Kansas City was one of the healthiest teams in the league last year on both sides of the ball, specifically on the offensive line, where they could potentially see and reap those benefits of continuity for a unit that we had major question marks about last year. Payne, I don't want to bury the lead here, since obviously the biggest question I think casual fans have about Kansas City is how much much different will this offense look without Tyreek Hill to take the lid off the defense, coming with the caveat that Kansas City's opposition really did a great job adjusting last year, playing a too high safety look, other than Gus Bradley right here in Las Vegas, that maybe now when it's picking your poison, having a slew of receivers who can operate underneath could serve to Patrick Mahomes' benefit.
You know, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense were actually fantastic again last year, despite all the negativity from the talking TV heads and the keyboard warriors. It just wasn't to the standard they created for themselves, and I think we all expected. You look across the board, the Chiefs were still number 2 in early down success rate. Only the Buccaneers were fractionally better. Chiefs only faced third downs on 18% of plays. That was the lowest rate in the league, and that's something we talk about all the time. Do you have the ability to bypass third down on early downs? And they sure as hell did. And then when the Chiefs actually faced a third down, the distance was the shortest in the league, and they converted at the highest rate. Across the board, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes led a Chiefs offense that was number 1 in points per drive, percentage of drives that ended with points scored. I mean, you name it, they did it. The one area that regressed in a major way was the explosiveness. It was a dip from 2nd to 19th year over year in big plays, and that was pretty much, as you alluded to, a byproduct of Mahomes and the Chiefs offense seeing too high shell at the second highest rate in the league. It was a byproduct of defenses understanding we can't blitz Mahomes anymore and create negative situations for ourselves in the back end. Mahomes was blitzed just 12% of the time, lowest rate in the league, and by 8% lower than the second least blitzed quarterback, to put that in perspective. And then you saw Andy Reid combat those two things with short and intermediate passes, right? Defenses would keep their safeties deep. Mahomes' target depth was 32nd on early downs, so shorter passes. That correlated to fewer explosives. This is something we covered throughout last season, so it's not new for any of the loyal listeners. Now, the sentiment from the talking heads again is, if the explosiveness dipped from 2nd to 19th last season with Tyreek Hill, how will the Chiefs possibly survive without Tyreek? The first thing is Tyreek wasn't running as many deep routes anymore, right? Andy Reid wasn't going to have Tyreek aimlessly run 50-yard sprints into double coverage deep down the field. Reid started working Tyreek into the intermediate and short passing game. That's not really his expertise because he still is a little bit of a body catcher at times. But the point being is, for as fast as Tyreek is, he finished 43rd in ADOT, 72nd in yards per reception. Brett Veach absolutely wanted to keep Tyreek. You're not better without Tyreek. Let's not sugarcoat that. But last year's version of Tyreek Hill isn't worth $120 million. And I think over the years, you know, we've seen, you know, when Tyreek Hill hasn't been off the field, when he hasn't been on the field, we have that data, right? It's not going to just completely fall off a cliff, right? Because whether he was, you know, missing full games, whether he was injured, whether he just needed a breather on a snap, whatever kept Tyreek Hill from playing that specific snap, we have the data. Mahomes still the second best quarterback in EPA per dropback since 2018 on plays without Tyreek Hill on the field, right? Mahomes doesn't just suddenly turn into a pumpkin at midnight without him. So I think that's something to really factor in. I also want to see the defensive looks that get presented to the Chiefs this season. Let's see what Andy Reid has come up with also, right? I mean, he spent an entire offseason to combat this, but I think there's two things that are likely true when you project ahead here. If defenses don't play too high shell against the Chiefs at the rate they did last season because Tyreek Hill's gone, there's still elite speed here, right? You have MVS, Sky Moore, Mecole Hardman. Those three guys are 4.37, 4.41, and 4.33 40 guys. If the Chiefs continue seeing the high rates of too high shell, look at the preseason drives Mahomes and the starters have played the last few weeks. Andy Reid went extremely heavy sets, either two tight ends or he's playing a fullback and a tight end. And what we saw, that look either dictated the defense to adjust pre-snap and come out of too high, and then it was game on, we're throwing downfield. Or if defenses stayed in too high, the Chiefs said, sure, right? We'll take the box count advantage and run right at you. And so I think the Chiefs did a pretty good job on those Mahomes drives in the preseason, dictating coverage. Let's see if that translates to the regular season. I think it should, right? And just because we've kind of grown accustomed to this high-flying offense, don't forget the Chiefs' offensive line, 3rd in run block win rate last year, 8th in line yards created. The Chiefs were 4th in EPA per rush on early downs the first 3 quarters, finished top 10 in schedule-adjusted rush efficiency on all downs. Like, this isn't a one-trick pony here. Like, the Chiefs didn't just say, like, shit, we can't do X, Y, and Z, and we're just going to, like, keep trying to do X, Y, and Z. They're going to, I think they're going to adapt and adjust. We saw a little bit of that last year. The Chiefs were certainly better as the year went on, dinking and dunking their way down the field. And certainly, I think when we think about this, right, it's just like throw the Chiefs away.
Yeah,
they were like one possession away from a 3-score lead in the AFC Championship game and would have opened a favorite in the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think they're looking at this and saying, hey, Tyreek Hill took the bag, we're completely screwed. They went out, they signed Juju and MVS, they drafted Sky Moore. I don't see massive issues offensively for the Chiefs that most people are projecting. And you also have to factor in the Chiefs will play a bottom 10 schedule of passing defenses this season. The only real area of concern is right tackle. Lucas Niang is still recovering from the patellar tendon tear he suffered in Cincinnati. He's been placed on the PUP. So it looks like Andrew Wiley is your starting right tackle. I am a little surprised that Brent Veach didn't go out, bring an older, affordable vet that's still capable. I would have kicked the tires on Ty Nishke. The other thing that's really important, right, is the Chiefs' offense needs more opportunities this season. Andy Reid's and Patrick Mahomes had the fewest total number of drives last year. And that's just basic math, right? Fewer opportunities, fewer possible points. Really, this comes down to the defense, like getting off the field and getting the ball back into Mahomes and Reid's hands.
Hey, I mean, a full breakdown of the Chiefs' offense, and we didn't talk about arguably their best weapon, not named Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce, who comes into the year with 6 straight seasons of 1,000-plus yards. No tight end has come close in that department, 29 career 100-yard games, and he'll most likely surpass Gronk this year for 5th most yards by a tight end all time. So this is a guy who's been a key cog who, to your point, operates underneath as well as anybody that's out there. And when you try and figure out how to defend Kansas City, on some levels it can get more difficult if you know you're not going to focus on Tyreek Hill. So it'll be fascinating to watch this team in their season opener against Arizona and how they choose to attack. Now,
don't you think, though, they have a little bit more depth
I think
receiver? Like last year, it's Tyreek, it's Kelce, and then it's who? Like maybe it's Byron Pringle, maybe it's Robinson, maybe it's Mecole. It feels like the depth is a little bit better there.
So without Tyreek, my take on this team is that they don't have that same high-end talent. And if I'm looking for a parallel, and of course it's not always apples to apples, it's almost like the New England Patriots over the years, that everybody else gets elevated because you have one of the best quarterbacks in the league that can spread it around. And that in and of itself can be oftentimes more difficult for a defense to game plan for. If one week Juju's got 6 catches, another week MVS is going to get the targets over the top. Mecole Hardman finally bursts through. And it's just picking a variety of different ways to go about attacking, the same way that you saw from New England when they went running back by committee, the Randy Moss years notwithstanding, that you didn't know which weapon Tom Brady was going to focus on every week. So I think defenses will key on Travis Kelce. They're going to force these receivers to step up. And if they do, it's going to be a very difficult out for a lot of teams, not only in the division, but across the league. You mentioned a key number here, and I think it's lost on a lot of folks talking about Kansas City's offense and how few possessions they ran offensively. And that was evident with some of their struggles defensively last year. I mean, they fell to 22nd in overall pass defense, 24th in defensive efficiency. Now, they were able to make up for some of that with, red zone defense and some other numbers that I don't think are repeatable if they're on the field nearly as much. One of the big issues, though, is the Kansas City's defensive front has underwhelmed in recent years. Accumulated just 31 sacks. It was actually the 4th worst in the NFL. They haven't had a player with double-digit sacks since 2018 when they had 2 guys do that in Chris Jones and Dee Ford. And Kansas City had a sack percentage well below 5%, 3rd worst in the NFL. We've talked about this Kansas City defense for years. It's built to play with leads. When you're not up by 10 to 14 points and you're asked to be good down to down, that's not this Chiefs' strength. When you look at Kansas City on the defensive side, do you think there's reason to believe that there can be a bounce back, or is there cause for concern with the stop unit in 2022?
Yeah, it's the big question. And last year was Spag's worst defense that he's had in his 3-year stint with the Chiefs. They went from 14th in the Super Bowl year to 22nd to then 24th, as you alluded to, in schedule adjusted efficiency. And you could make the case that it would have been far worse had the Chiefs not been so good situationally. They were top 10 in both 3rd down and red zone defense. Those are like 2 of the highest leverage situations you can have that are highly unpredictable relative to other defensive metrics. You also lose Tyrann Mathieu, Charvarius Ward, and Melvin Ingram. And the schedule You look heading into this season, we project the Chiefs will face a top 3 schedule of offenses. So this could be tough. Now, the guys you have up front, some solid pieces. Chris Jones has to remain his dominant self. Playing inside all season should help. He finished number 2 in pass rush win rate, first in pressure rate. Recorded 14% pressure rate on just pass rush snaps. So he was fantastic. If you look next to him, that's kind of the question mark. Derek Nandi, coming off his worst season, hopefully a bounce back there, only signed a 1-year deal, so he's in a contract year again. Danny Shelton, one of the league's better run stuffers from 2015 to 2019, was signed a few weeks ago. I think that helps kind of shore up the run defense, but also pushes some of the younger guys like a Kalen Saunders, who's extremely talented, but just hasn't really produced quite yet. And then you look to replace Melvin Ingram. The Chiefs went out and signed Carlos Dunlap and then drafted George Karlaftis. Let's see if Dunlap still has some juice at 33. Did have 10 sacks. Did have a pressure on more than 11% of pass rush snaps last year. Held up really well, setting the edge and tackling for Seattle last season. Karlaftis is a guy we know can set the edge. I know Veach thinks they hit a home run there. Let's see. Had an impressive debut there in the preseason with a 31% win rate and 4 pressures. You're looking at him. Our model's projecting like 7.9 sacks for Karlaftis, so that would be a good number for him year 1. And then you're saying, like, does Frank Clark return to being a solid player ever again? He's coming off arguably his worst season ever, so it's tough to envision worse play. Linebackers are young and talented with Bolton, Gay, and Leo Chanel. They just need to kind of mature and take that next step. The secondary has some questions. There's just a lot of young guys, and you're going to face a top 3 projected schedule of passing offenses. The list of quarterbacks, it's not a fun one, right? It's Justin Herbert twice. It's Kyler. It's Tom Brady, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Russell Wilson twice, Derek Carr twice, Matt Ryan, and then the 2 young and supremely talented kids there, Trevor Lawrence and Trey Lance. So a lot of high-end offenses. I know Tyrann Mathieu is the leader of the defense. Hasn't really been great the last 2 seasons. If you look last year among safeties with at least 600 snaps, he graded out 32nd. Justin Reed is younger, and I think a change of environment gets Reed back to the 2018-19 form, which would certainly be better than Tyrann Mathieu last year. And if you listen to Reed's presser, he said in the nicest possible way how much he disliked playing in Lovie Smith's vanilla system. Corner position is thin. L'Jarius Sneed he's got to be the guy, right? And he has all the tools. He's 6'2" with 4.3 speed, a 32-inch arms. He's got a 41-inch vertical. He was fantastic as a rookie. Play dipped a little bit in year 2, but you go back to his rookie season, knowing Spags likes to play man and press coverage. Snead only allowed 13 catches for 108 yards and a 47 passer rating in man coverage as a rookie. There should be a year 3 bump here. Rashad Fenton has quietly been a damn good cover corner the last 3 seasons. Last year alone, graded out 8th among corners with at least 400 snaps. And then you have Trent McDuffie, the rookie from Washington. He's versatile, can play outsider in the slot. Heck, if you look at Washington, the Huskies put him at safety in the box because he's a really willing tackler. He's a former track guy. He's a film junkie. His final season in the Pac-12, McDuffie finished first in yards allowed per coverage snap at 0.39 yards. 44% of targets were completed. He forced an incompletion 17% of time. So the pedigree is there. Let's keep an eye on him for week 1. He's going through the concussion protocol after getting knocked out of the final preseason game. There's certainly talent on this side of the ball. It just feels like with this schedule, Todd, right? Like a season where the Chiefs finish somewhere in that 14 to 18 range of schedule adjusted efficiency would be a huge accomplishment.
I just can't believe that you gave Trent McDuffie all sorts of compliments and accolades. I figured all of those stats would have come with an asterisk, knowing he played against Pac-12 opponents over the course of his time in college.
It's a pass-happy conference. That's the one thing you can gauge.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think, talking about this Kansas City Chiefs schedule explains why this was a team when their win total was originally posted. I believe it was 11.5, even 12 juiced under, and immediately saw under money. Not saying it's going to happen, but their schedule of opponents over the first 8 weeks, if you're a Chiefs fan, you're going to get a ton of entertaining football, but you would like a couple of easy winners in there, and that's not quite going to be the case. So they better bring their lunch pail over the first 2 months of the season.
I don't know if this is 100% accurate, so I hate doing this, but my mind tells me, I'm trying to remember a conversation I had a couple months ago. The first 7 weeks, based upon opponent, I think was our toughest 7-game opening stretch we had ever seen since doing this professionally in 2004. So it is a gauntlet to start the season.
Yeah, pretty wild to think about it when you try and figure out what Kansas City's ceiling looks like this year. Obviously, it's Super Bowl or bust, even without Tyreek Hill. At the same time, they'll have their hands full out of the gates. And for a team that has aspirations and not just winning the division, but the conference as well, you figure you get through those first 8 games at 6-2 or even 5-3, you're in a pretty good spot going forward. Want to remind all of you, our loyal listeners, you can follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. You, of course, can follow me there as well. Most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod, and right atop that feed you'll see a pinned tweet with all of our contest details for our football free roll this season. Pick 5 games a week against the spread. Best record over the course of 18 weeks will take home the prestigious Bet the Board trophy. It's as simple as that, and you can get all the specifics and sign up at bettheboardcontest.com. 2 teams.
Todd, the one thing there though, right? Like with that contest, it's about giving back to you guys, right? You guys have supported us. We've never had distribution. We're not part of a network, yet we compete with all of those podcasts, and it's because of the loyal listeners. So this is something we want to do to give back to you. $6,000 in end-of-season prizes. It's a lot of cash. And then we have weekly winners. So there's cash prizes for each and every single week to keep you motivated. If you start like shit the first month, that isn't reason to kind of quit on the contest. There are weekly prizes there as well. BetTheBoardContest.com. Sign up. You'll have until the opening Sunday of the NFL season.
Yeah, it's a great point. I know life tends to get in the way. People miss a week here or there, and of course it'll probably take you out of the running for the full season prize, but it shouldn't serve as a deterrent to get those Bet the Board prize pack, as Payne mentioned. Cash, swag, all sorts of unique items that you can wear with pride as a member of the Bet the Board community. 2 teams left to go in the AFC West, and one, of course, a stone's throw away from where I call home in the Las Vegas Raiders. And when you're looking at Vegas, they're 40-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook to win the Super Bowl this year, 7-1 long shots to emerge atop the division in the AFC West, and their win total, 8.5, shaded slightly to the over at minus $1.15 at FanDuel Sportsbook. And when you look at the Raiders, this is a team that not only wants to return to the playoffs in back-to-back seasons, but they'd obviously like to win a playoff game for the first time since 2002. It's been 19 seasons without a postseason win. It's the 3rd longest drought in the National Football League. Josh McDaniels, of course, takes over for a team that was in transition last year with John Gruden being let go in the middle of the season. But this is also a football team that lived extremely dangerously last year. They were 4-0 in overtime games, which tied an NFL all-time record. They were 5-1 in games decided by a field goal or less. They were 7-2 in one-score games. And the most ridiculous statistic of all, in terms of the Raiders' good fortune, they trailed at some point in 15 games last year. Their point differential from week 9 through the end of the season was a minus 79. So I know, Payne, I'm not painting the rosiest outlook for what the Raiders can expect in 2022, but they did add one of the league's best offensive weapons in a blockbuster deal this offseason in Davante Adams to pair alongside his college teammate in Derek Carr.
It's really an interesting offense. I think we're hoping, or I should say I think if you're a Raiders fan, you're hoping that the second time around for Josh McDaniels turns out better than the first, that he learns from his past ways. And the rumor is there, it's like he just tried too hard to be Bill Belichick in Denver and basically alienated every player and member of the staff. And it's just much easier to be an asshole when you're respected and have accomplished things on your own. And being propped up by Belichick and Brady may land you the job, but ultimately players and staff members see right through it. And that was his undoing in Denver. Now, if you look at Josh McDaniels, he's led 6 offenses without Tom Brady pulling the strings. Those 6 offenses have finished with an average schedule-adjusted efficiency rank of 18th. Now, McDaniel certainly has some nice weapons. Adams, Waller, Renfrow, it's a fantastic trio. Adams finished 3rd in yards per route run last season. When Renfrow was targeted, Carr had a 124 passer rating. That was 10th best. Gigantic number when you put that in the context of Renfrow's average target depth being less than 6.5 yards. And then Waller was 8th in yards per route run. He has missed a majority of camp dealing with a hamstring injury, so let's see how that plays out. But where I'm going with this is, on paper, the Raiders' offense looks like the hottest girl on planet Earth. we're going to find out if she has a heart, because the Raiders' offensive line freaks me out. And I think it's going to cause potential consistency issues and not allow Carr and those 3 elite weapons to reach its highest possible ceiling. Colton Miller made a massive leap last year, played to an elite level, graded out the 3rd best tackle among those with 1,000 snaps. The data that I have hinted at suggests, again, you can scheme around one good offensive lineman as a defense. The other 4 projected starters are John Simpson, Andre James, Lester Cotton, and Alex Leatherwood. And I can go left to right here. If you're looking at John Simpson, he graded out 72nd best guard out of 88 qualifiers last season. Andre James is an undrafted center from UCLA, and I will give him some credit. He's improved each of the last 3 seasons. But even with that improvement, he graded out the 21st best center last year. Lester Cotton is an undrafted free agent from 2019. He's played 5 total snaps in the regular season through 437 preseason snaps, which is where Lester Cotton does most of his work. He's graded out below average against guys likely finding other types of work. And then there's Alex Leatherwood at right tackle, a position through 4 games as a rookie he proved he couldn't play, so he's moved to guard. And Leatherwood played more than 900 snaps between guard and tackle last season. Now, I get it. He can certainly improve. We've seen maturation from young offensive linemen. Sometimes they get a little bit overwhelmed. It would be difficult to be worse, but Leatherwood allowed a 9% pressure rate. He was credited with 38 blown blocks, 4th most between all guards and tackles with at least 280 snaps. Leatherwood graded at 169th of 174 players.
Payne, the crazy part about Leatherwood, too, and we'll see exactly what the Raiders roster looks like when they meet league limits at 53. There was talk early on in camp that this guy was going to be one of the players that could potentially be cut because this current regime has no loyalty to a player that everyone thought was largely overdrafted going in the top 20 a season ago. So he's going to be an interesting name to keep tabs on if the Raiders happen to have a surprise there and Leatherwood is out of the mix. I don't see it happening, but I know that was widely rumored locally, early on in training camp.
They haven't found anybody else. It ultimately comes down to protecting Derek Carr. And that's going to be vital if Adams, Waller, and Renfrow are going to play at peak. You look last year, Carr was pressured at the 11th highest rate among qualifying quarterbacks. The offensive line, again, is projecting to be worse. The schedule of passing defenses isn't projected to be daunting, but goes from 7th easiest to above average. And then last year, you look at Carr, he graded out 27th among 40 qualifying quarterbacks when pressured. His success rate dipped 21%, completion rate 21%, EPA fell off a cliff. Again, when you project ahead, it wouldn't appear as though Derek Carr is going to have a complimentary ground game either, right? I mean, I like Zamir White, but the run game isn't just going to dramatically improve here. The Raiders were 25th in schedule-adjusted rush efficiency. The O-line is worse unless Leatherwood makes that massive leap. I know Josh Jacobs has kind of been the scapegoat for a poor running offense, but the Raiders were 31st in run block win rate. So again, I like Carr, although high floor, low ceiling. The 3 weapons are great, but what else is there here? The O-line just makes me nervous, and I just think when you get in shootouts and it's known you have to pass and you have that offensive line, and you look at some of the defensive ends in just its own division, I don't know. I don't necessarily see it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team, honestly, and you think about this, and of course, you can't erase history, but how much different the narrative is coming into this year. Forget the Davante Adams trade. Obviously, he plays a role and has to be factored into the calculus here, but if it's a team that doesn't make the playoffs, happens to lose to the Chargers, and given how anemic they were offensively down the stretch, there are some major red flags, and you did an eloquent job highlighting the primary concern, which is the building blocks of any offense along that offensive line. Now, unfortunately for Raiders fans, if the offense scuttles, I'm not sure that there is enough defensively to bail them out. Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator, tasked with trying to improve a defense that has not finished in the top 15 in scoring defense since 2002, which was the last time they won their most recent playoff game. A season ago, they were 26th in points per game. They were 29th in takeaways. They were 32nd in red zone touchdown percentage allowed. You figure that number will regress in a positive manner. But, I mean, the numbers there for their red zone defense, it was actually the worst efficiency mark of any team dating back to 2000. You look up and down this roster, yes, you bring in Chandler Jones to pair with Max Crosby. You help out a little bit in the secondary with Rocky Sin, but you've also lost Yannick Ngakoue, Quentin Jefferson as well. Defensively, how do you even begin going about creating realistic expectations for what you're going to see from the Silver and Black?
It's tough because I don't know what Patrick Graham is. He obviously comes from the Belichick Flores tree, so you like the pedigree for a defensive mind. Directionally, his defensive principles are fine. He's going to mix some coverages, certainly more than Gus Bradley did. And when Graham's operated his own defenses, the pressure rates aren't very high, and maybe that works with two elite defensive ends. To this point, though, Graham's been a defensive coordinator the last 3 seasons. 1 year in Miami, 2 years for the Giants. 32nd, 19th, and 18th in schedule-adjusted defensive efficiency. Not great. If I'm keeping things fair, there was a 1-year boost with the Giants last year going from 28th to 19th, and Graham certainly has far more premium talent than both those Giants defenses. He's just walking into a tough situation here. It's like, hey, Mahomes, Herbert, Russell Wilson 6 times a year. That's fun. And then the Raiders project to play a top 5 schedule of offenses overall and the 3rd most difficult schedule of passing offenses. So Patrick Graham has his work cut out for him here. And you look at the Raiders secondary. Some young talent there still makes me a little nervous, right? Trayvon Mullins, kind of the catalyst, only played 5 games last season. He's in a contract year, so I'd expect an uptick in both games played and production. But through 3 seasons, there's been these great flashes. But even in Mullins' best season, he graded out 62nd among 139 quarters that played at least 225 snaps in coverage. Casey Hayward is the guy that's actually going to be missed. He was 16th in the same category. That guy just is good. He just doesn't stop. And he gets older, just continues to play. The 2 rookies showed a ton of potential. You have Trayvon Moehrig, solid. Nate Hobbs was fantastic for a 5th-round rookie, becoming a starter, and then grading out top 10 in coverage while also finishing 8th in adjusted yards allowed per coverage snap was fantastic. Gut says there's probably only one direction to go from there. You mentioned Rock Ya-Sin.
Off-field decision-making leaves a lot to be desired for Nate Hobbs. That could be his undoing more so than what we'll see on a football field. But go ahead.
A lot goes on in that town.
Apparently so. So they've told me over the years.
You mentioned Rock Ya-Sin. He's part of the Ngakoue trade. Did have his best season in coverage, but he was only a part-time starter last year. For whatever reason, coaches just didn't trust him. Maybe around a different scheme and coaching staff and environment that there's an uptick. But Anthony Everett was signed for depth. Apparently, he's had a great camp. Graded out the 10th best press cover corner last season. Maybe he leaps Rock Ya-Sin. We'll see there. The Raiders defense, when I look at them, comes down to line play. Can Max Crosby and Chandler Jones simultaneously dominate? We know what Crosby did last year. Led the league in regular season pressures, more than a 17% pressure rate on pass rush snaps. Chandler Jones, more, I think, time removed from the Achilles injury should help. If he can return to his 2019 form, look out. This is a wild tandem there. The Raiders finished 9th in defensive rush efficiency last season, 11th in EPA per rush allowed. So they were pretty good stopping the run. Jonathan Hankins, just, a massive humanity at 345 pounds. He's coming off his worst season as a pro. I would expect an uptick there. You get Bilal Nichols to come over in free agency. If he can get back to his 2020 form, this is a decent duo inside. And then you have Andrew Billings, appears to be the 3rd guy in the defensive tackle rotation. Had a solid 2018 and 19 seasons. If he can return to that form, it'd be huge. But you get my vibe on the interior here. It's like there's not much depth past those 3 guys I mentioned, and all 3 are coming off really poor seasons. So this feels like a potential weakness, barring 3 guys simultaneously return to form. Denzel Perriman and Devon Diablo, I don't know if you can play them at the same time because both have coverage issues. So we'll see. That's apparently how it's heading, as those 2 guys being the starter. Listen, I think I hate to crap on the Raiders, right? Because Mark Davis saw the Raiders make the playoffs. They go into Cincinnati, they play a tough game against a team that could have won the Super Bowl, and he said, let's go all in. So you make these splash moves for Davante Adams and Chandler Jones, and I get it from a business perspective. Like, this is a business regardless of how much entertainment football is for us and how much we can make betting it. Mark isn't one of the richer owners. And then the brand new stadium opens in the middle of COVID in a tourist city, and money's not flowing like expected. So they needed some pizzazz here. But this doesn't feel like the right way to build for longevity and continued success, especially when you look at the landscape in the AFC and the AFC West specifically. Like, you did this for what? To be the third or fourth best team in your own division? And let's not forget, you mentioned some of those things at the top, right? The Raiders were outscored last season by nearly 70 points. Trailed at some point in 15 games, you said?
Yep.
Right? But they made the playoffs being top 8 in both field goal and fumble luck. 4-0 in overtime games, you mentioned. 7-2 in one-score games. When you look past the 10-7 record and making the playoffs, the data suggests the Raiders were just as far from being a Super Bowl quality team as Washington last season.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, and I think sometimes you lose sight of the forest and the trees, and the Raiders may be a byproduct of that. Although one thing I'll take umbrage with, you cannot shit on franchise kicker Daniel Carlson. He might be all the Raiders have to hang their hats on going forward when you look at the roster and the way it's currently constructed. Now, the other thing, too, with the Raiders, schedule-wise, I mean, we're going to get a pretty good indication of exactly where this team is before they even get to their bye week, which is really early in Week 6. They're at the Chargers, home against the Cardinals, at the Titans, home against the Broncos, and at Kansas City. So you get your two arguably most difficult division games out of the way by Week 6, but there's a realistic chance if things don't break the right way that this is a Raiders team that could be 1-4, wondering what could have been and how they can resurrect their season over the second half of the campaign.
You mentioned Daniel Carlson. It feels like the Raiders are trying to sabotage the poor guy. That field, tough to kick on.
Yeah, it was not exactly ideal, but there was a little bit of noise to that, and I think that's why the Raiders were a little bit cautious in terms of who played against the New England Patriots. UNLV played their season opener against Idaho State. From what I've been told...
I'm aware. We lost some money on that.
Yeah.
Brumfield looked like Mike Vick in his prime.
That may have been a lot more about Idaho State looking like they had 6 defenders on the field for most of that game. But from what I've been told, that entire field is going to be torn up. It'll be resodded. UNLV will start to play on their AstroTurf. And the worst story about all that, Payne, there was actually a UNLV cheerleader who tore her Achilles in that game on Saturday because she landed in one of those divots. So let's just get rid of that field entirely, because that was an embarrassment to be showcased on CBS Sports Network for college and for anybody that watched the Raiders-Patriots game. I mean, that looked like a putting green at your local municipal course, not somewhere a team should be playing football.
Unfortunately for that young lady, you are a taken man, or you could have consoled her back in her recovery.
I tried to coach the brother-in-law up. I said, hey, look, you can be there for her in her time of need. But I'm not sure he took so kindly to that particular stance. But moving from the Raiders to the team that they eliminated last year in Week 18, and arguably the most entertaining football game of the entire season, that, of course, would be the Los Angeles Chargers, who find themselves 14-1 to win the Super Bowl at FanDuel Sportsbook. They're plus 240 to win the division, and their win total sits at 10, shaded to the over at minus $1.25. Last year, this was a Chargers team whose coaching philosophy drew a ton of ire from the old school football guys, a ton of praise for those folks that like to be a little bit forward-facing, and their 22 fourth down conversions were the most by a team since 1991. Their 65% success rate on fourth down was a top 5 rate league-wide, and they went for it 4 times inside their own 25-yard line last year. They also went for and converted the most 2-point tries in the league, going 7 of 11 in those opportunities. But Payne, we were on this very podcast, and I'm not sure what week it was last year, and you came out pretty early on and said if this Chargers team is going to realize their potential, Joe Lombardi has to realize that he's got a legitimate quarterback with a howitzer for an arm in Justin Herbert, and he's got to get over this dink and dunk mentality he utilized with Drew Brees. Is this the year that the Chargers start to take more deep shots, open up things underneath, and really take the governor off what this offense can be if it's allowed to hum on all cylinders?
Yeah, we don't need to sugarcoat this. Joe Lombardi has to be better putting this Chargers offense in positions to succeed. If Lombardi doesn't, this is going to be another disappointing season where the Chargers underachieve, and I think that's kind of becoming commonplace for the franchise. The hope is that he gets his act together, and I think if you listened to this show religiously, we did identify this before anyone. I know people were raving about the Chargers offense week 1 against Washington when they picked up 27 first downs and put up 424 yards of offense and won their road opener. And this is exactly the time frame, because I went back and listened and searched for this in preparation for this podcast. The first thing you said Monday morning, Todd, when we did our week 1 recap, was the offense looked good. And my rebuttal was Justin Herbert bailed the offense out. Yeah, 14 for 19 on third downs in week 1. Just not sustainable. The Chargers have to be better on early downs. It can't just be Justin Herbert bailing the offense out on late downs. If you look at early downs, intended air yards for a quarterback with a massive arm, not good. And we joked about Lombardi not realizing Drew Brees wasn't his quarterback anymore. Herbert on first down the first 3 quarters, 27th in EPA per attempt. On all early downs the first 3 quarters, Herbert's average intended air yards was 6.4. That was 36th among qualifying quarterbacks. And not only was the target depth a problem, when you paired that with skill players only breaking 83 tackles total, the lowest of any offense in the NFL, you can see why Herbert was faced with so many third downs. The Chargers offense faced the second most third downs of any offense in the NFL. Fortunately, Joe Lombardi's, has Justin Herbert, who thrived in these negative situations. Herbert was second and third and fourth down. Second and third and fourth down EPA per attempt. He did a fantastic job, navigating pressure. If you look at his EPA outside of the pocket, third best. Throwing on the move, 7th best in EPA per attempt. So he was doing things to really help this offense in the team overall, because Joe Lombardi wasn't. If you look at Lombardi, despite having an offense just, stuffed with difficult throws and not a lot of play action or RPOs to help a young quarterback, Herbert was still the second most accurate quarterback against man coverage. It was just wild to see what Herbert did for this offense. And you talked about some of those long distances on third and fourth down. If you look at this, with 7 or more yards to go on second down, the Chargers were third in efficiency. With 7 or more yards to go on third or fourth down, the Chargers were second in efficiency. Just banana land numbers. And even if Justin Herbert improves, I don't know if those kind of numbers can continue. So Lombardi has to be better, because I just don't know any quarterback, no matter how good they are, can be put in that many minus EV situations and play that well. There hasn't been a ton of new resources that were brought in offensively. Sure, you signed Gerald Everett to replace Cook, did draft Zion Johnson with the 17th pick. Aside from that, the offense is pretty identical from a parts perspective. Now, Josh Palmer appears to be a guy trending upwards, should continue to improve there and command more targets. Maybe Palmer helps with the wide receiver screen game, something the Chargers were dreadful with last season. It would be nice to have a surging third target. He's played well in the preseason, but overall, the receiver group needs to be a little bit more consistent for Herbert as well. 38 drop passes, most in the NFL. That should regress towards the mean. Right tackle, still kind of the question mark here. Looks like Trey Pipkins is going to be out Storm Norton, and then that will allow the Chargers to not completely reconfigure the offensive line, because there's been some talks about Matt Filer sliding to right tackle and then playing 2 rookies at guard. Let's see what Pipkins has. He was drafted in the 3rd round in 2019. Pedigree isn't terrible. He's 6'6", 310. Did play 173 snaps last season, but you look at those snaps, pretty productive. Among tackles that played at least 150 snaps, Pipkins graded out 20th of 97. So if you can get that kind of production to carry over to an 800, 900,000 snap season, you're going to be onto something there. And the Chargers offensive line at that point can be pretty special, because, Rashawn Slater and Corey Linsley at tackle and center are 2 of the best in the business. Matt Filer's a damn good guard. Zion Johnson, again, the 17th pick, so a pedigree guy there. If you can get Zion and Pipkins to plug the holes along the offensive line, which is kind of where they were weak, right? And add those to the 3 horses, I think you're onto something here, really. Like, even in the run game last year, without like having a full starting five of just good, solid offensive linemen. Third down runs were horrific, dead last in the NFL in EPA per rush attempt there. I think you could see the offensive line improve in some of the power rate metrics, right? Like if you're looking at offensive line power success rate, which basically measures first down or a touchdown accomplished on either third or fourth down with less than 2 yards to go. Chargers O-line was 25th in that metric. So there was just some real areas of concern for the Chargers offensive line. If the right side gets solved, there's really not any other problems here. I think aside from Joe Lombardi. Let's see what he's able to do. It's not hard to spend the offseason self-scouting, right, and implementing things in year two you learned about your offense in the first go-around with these specific players. If Joe Lombardi doesn't improve, you're hoping that Justin Herbert can be Houdini again, and maybe that's enough, knowing the Chargers face the sixth easiest schedule of pass defenses. Maybe that's all it takes. Justin Herbert just being Houdini again against this schedule of pass defenses, and Joe Lombardi doesn't really optimize the offense. We'll see, though.
Hey, I mean, if the offense is going to look a lot of the same as far as the pieces that are there, it's clearly because the Chargers spent the entire offseason trying to figure out what they could do to fortify this team defensively. And there was a huge infusion of veteran talent that this team went about going to obtain this offseason. And you can pick your poison in terms of which names you feel will be the most impactful. From J.C. Jackson, who comes over from the New England Patriots, Khalil Mack acquired from the Chicago Bears via trade, Sebastian Joseph Day doesn't change his home stadium, will just change locker rooms, coming over from the Rams and familiarity with Brandon Staley when he was the defensive coordinator there. Kyle Van Noy, and a player that's named to the Payne Insider Hall of Fame team that's never quite lived up to his potential, only because he's often injured, and Bryce Callahan. Is this defense now one of the more underrated units in the entire league? Or how long, in your opinion, do you feel like it'll take this group to gel if all of these veterans can contribute and shore up some of the shortcomings that were pretty pronounced last year for this Chargers team, specifically a run defense that I think you and I might have been able to pick up 50 yards against?
This was needed to be, have guys added to this unit, because it was ugly last year. It just was not good for Brandon Staley in year one. Bottom third of the league in early down success rate. Second worst in both third down and red zone defenses. You're kind of joked about this. Just couldn't stop anybody on the ground. 30th in EPA allowed per rush. 30th
I believe the Payne line.
Rush efficiency.
I believe the appropriate Payne line is couldn't stop a nosebleed. Now you can continue.
Could not stop a nosebleed. Yes, that's an accurate depiction, right? Horrifically, they were terrible in some of the high leverage spots as well, like third and fourth down and short, along with goal-to-goal situations. Chargers were 26th in third and fourth down and short and goal-to-goal situations. So they were not good in most areas. And I think, we knew the style of defense Brandon Staley wanted to run. It's this, new school defense built to stop passing attacks. He didn't really have the personnel to run it. And I understand that, it's year one. You want to implement your system. You don't want to deviate too far from that and confuse guys. But he also wouldn't adjust. Like, give us a little adjustment week to week. So you would see the Chargers routinely play with light boxes on early downs. When only 6 defenders played in the box, opponents averaged 5.5 yards a carry. That was, league average, 4.8 there. So just to provide some context, it was just a very soft Chargers defense. They graded out 28th in tackling as well, missed the third most tackles. That can't happen this season, right? There's just no excuses. The talent's ridiculous. The players are there to execute this specific scheme and fit very well. Bosa and Khalil Mack on the edge are going to be a problem. Like, Mack still has plenty of juice left. Career 14% pressure rate on pass rush snaps. Bosa 15%. And the kicker is, like, Khalil Mack's fantastic setting the edge. Bosa is a plus run defender as well. Last 6 seasons, Mack and Bosa are both top 5 among edge rushers and wins above replacement. The problem area from last year was the interior of the defensive line. So what happens? You bring in 6'5", 315-pound Sebastian Joseph Day, who ran Staley's system with the Rams when they were together there. Through the first 3 seasons, Joseph Day has a run stop on more than 13% of running snaps. Austin Johnson's another big 315-pounder. He had more than 11% run stop rate last season. You added Kyle Van Noy to the front 7 as well, which is a no-brainer at $2.3 million for a season. The secondary could be the most improved in the league. Staley, we know, likes to play with 5 or 6 defensive backs on the field. He did so at 75% of the snaps last year. J.C. Jackson, will miss the start of the season, I believe, after undergoing this minor ankle procedure. They claimed it would be 2 to 4 weeks. Let's see. Like, when you're competing for a Super Bowl, if he's not 100% week 1, like, there's no reason to put him out there. But we'll see how that ultimately unfolds to start the season. When he returns, though, like, proven lockdown corner. He graded out the very best corner in man coverage last season. Second best in that category over the last 4 seasons in man coverage for J.C. Jackson. Since 2018, opposing teams' passer ratings when throwing at J.C. Jackson, 38.1. If you just threw the ball into the ground every snap, your quarterback rating's 39.6. So just to give you an idea of what he brings to this defense. Bryce Callahan, my favorite under-the-radar slot corner. From 2017 to 2020, he was elite in the slot. If you look at 2020, he finished number 1 in passer rating allowed when in coverage. He's a perfect fit for Brandon Staley's scheme. And I think what's interesting here is, like, this could be the best value signing of the offseason. We talk about this virtually every year about a cornerback coming in on a cheap deal. Like, I know he's dealt with some foot and knee issues in recent years, but you absolutely take a flyer at $1.3 million for a corner with that pedigree, and that's a scheme fit every day of the week. Asante Samuel.
I'm trying to think of who some of the other guys that you have given that distinction to in the past. I think,
and they've all panned out.
Yeah, Casey Hayward was that guy last year that you figured that the Raiders.
The year prior was Xavier Woods.
Xavier Woods. I feel like there was Mackenzie Alexander in there and a couple other guys.
Xavier Rhodes, rather. I'm sorry.
And then I've had a couple of one-year deals that obviously, like you said, there's no risk into that kind of contract. The problem for Bryce Callahan is that I think Tommy Callahan has logged as many reps over the last couple seasons as Bryce has.
Tommy Callahan, I don't know if he can flip the hips as well. I don't know if he's a slot guy.
He's probably more of a run stuffer, I think.
Yeah, which could be needed if Sebastian Joseph Day were to go down with injury. We look at Asante Samuel Jr. as well as a rookie. Fantastic, allowed a 46 passer rating and coverage. Derwin James is a do-it-all safety. Brandon Staley's quote from a few weeks ago, just gushing over Derwin, tells you how vital he is to Staley's defense. But basically, Staley called him the heartbeat of the defense. He's the signal caller. You can play him deep. You can play him in the box. You can play him at corner. You can play him in the slot. You can blitz off the edge. You can play man or zone. Like, if you're looking at Derwin James as a safety, I think that would be doing him, no justice whatsoever. I think Derwin James is really important when you look at the lone weakness of this defense being linebacker, right? And then you look at the AFC West with Kelsey and Waller and Alberto. Like, Derwin James is essential, especially, looking at Kenneth Murray. You hate to say this, right, because you could just see the year 3 leap, but to this point, he's been a bust. He's heading into year 3. He kind of needs to find a role. He's played nearly 1,000 snaps as a rookie, graded out below average, played less than 400 snaps last season. In those snaps, he recorded a pressure or run stop on just 3% of them. And then in coverage, he allowed a 143 passer rating when targeted. So I don't know what Kenneth Murray is. Drew Tranquill played in the middle last year. There's some contract stuff going on there. He didn't show up to the voluntary OTA stuff. He was a little late to camp. Decent player. I just don't know if he's a long-term fit for this scheme and this organization. But this is very much, to your point, just like, point blank period. This defense can't be a liability. You can't finish 26th in schedule adjusted efficiency with a defensive-minded head coach and this much talent. The schedule of passing offenses the Chargers face projects to be the same as it was last season in difficulty. You would think finishing 31st in both red zone and third down defenses regress to the mean. I think the Chargers have to flirt with being a top 10 defense this year. It would be looked at as an underachievement.
And the scary part about it is if this defense does flirt with being a top 10 defense and the offense stays healthy, there is no ceiling that you can place on this football team going forward, because it's just be average in terms of your defensive capabilities, because this offense should be able to light the rest of the league on fire and arguably will be one of the most entertaining watches week to week. Fortunately, we'll get to see them early on in the season, a home game against the Raiders with a little bit of revenge on their mind and a very quick turnaround for a trip to Arrowhead for what I believe is Amazon Prime's first Thursday night regular season game of the year. So Chargers will be must-see TV more often than not. One last thing on the Chargers, Payne, when you look at the way that they've been priced, we saw some books out here in the desert open them up north of 4-1 to win the division. Those prices didn't last all that long. Have you seen anything as far as their win total or any of their big picture odds move this offseason?
I've seen it. And for a guy that hates investing long-term in high hold markets, we did dabble with the Chargers at 17-1 to win the Super Bowl. This is a tough team to assess because, Justin Herbert can grow a little bit more than last year. Some of the third down metrics and fourth down metrics are unsustainable. But there are question marks about Lombardi. Can Austin Eckler complete a full season being somewhat of a bell cow? Keenan Allen has been faded all offseason with receptions and things of that nature. Is he old? Mike Williams is being primed to make that leap as a number one receiver. Does that actually happen? So there are some, underlying things here that could prevent the Chargers from being as good offensively as we think they're going to be, right? This has the potential to be a number one offense, but within that, it's like Eckler hasn't always been the most reliable in terms of health. Is Mike Williams a bona fide one? Is Keenan Allen getting up there in age a little bit too quickly? Can Joe Lombardi get this thing figured out? Right tackle, as I mentioned. Can Pipkins evolve to being a full-time starter at a plus level? If all five of those things don't happen simultaneously, we're going to look at another year of underachievement for the Chargers. If you get a couple of those things to go in your direction, right, they're going to be a Super Bowl contender.
Hey, it's a team that we've talked about for having tantalizing talent in the past and never being able to realize all of that potential. We'll see if 2022 is the year with second-year head coach Brandon Staley. I want to remind all of you, as always, our loyal listeners, to follow Payne on Twitter, @PayneInsider. I'm Todd Furman. You can follow me there. And again, follow the podcast @BetTheBoardPod. As Payne mentioned earlier, sign up for the football free roll. That's BetTheBoardPodcast. I'm not helping anybody here. BetTheBoardContest.com. It's our way of showing our appreciation for all of those of you that have been with us since 2014, or if this happens to be the first time you're finding the Bet the Board podcast and trying to do your cram session with all 8 divisions, and of course 5 Power 5 conference previews for the college football ranks as well. But Payne, we finally get to the end of the road. We get to start talking about real, meaningful football, both on the college and NFL side. But I have to ask the question that I've asked 12 times before. Is this the episode where we don't have a best investment, or have you found something to get the listeners to the window this season?
Of course. We found something.
You are a man.
Digging.
You are a man of the people these days. Years ago, it'd have been like, no, we're going to have 5 best bets and 13 shows, and we're going to call it a day. Now you are officially a man of the people, that they're probably going to build small statues and shrines to you in their man caves.
Speaking of being men of the people, I will lump you in there. Pick 5 NFL contest. Go to bettheboardcontest.com. Sign up for that. Weekly prizes. Cash weekly prizes, $6,000 at the end of the season to a top 10. A lot of stuff going on there. We obviously appreciate all of the loyal listenership as we conclude our 13 previews. The start of the season's huge for us, obviously. Go to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. Please rate 5 stars for us. It helps with the algorithm. Leave a nice 5-star review with a little comment underneath it. We like to give back to you guys, so we will run another contest at the end of the NFL Week 1 podcast. Anyone who's left a 5-star review with a nice little comment will automatically qualify, and then we'll give out some cash prizes as we randomly pick some of those folks. As for the best bet.
Wait a second. Hold on. That's the first mention in 2022 of the Payne Insider randomizer that we're using. I was wondering when that was going to happen. So the fact that we got a preseason mention, anyone who had the under in terms of time frame for that can cash their tickets. But okay, go ahead. Best bet time.
I think when we look at this, right, like we have not had support from a ton of people in the space. We have not had distribution from large networks, and yet we're still competing with them because of our loyal listeners. So once a month, we do like to give back with cash prizes. Again, the contest, bettheboardcontest.com, probably over $10,000 in season-long prizes between weekly and the end of the year. Every 50 podcasts, we run a Twitter contest, which is a couple $100 in cash prizes. We just like to give back to you guys because we would not be here without you. To the best bet. Enough of the rambling. Stephon Diggs, under 99.5 receptions. It was a while ago we broke down the Buffalo Bills in our AFC East preview podcast. But we talked about a little bit of the dissension in the battle between Brian Daboll and McDermott. McDermott wants a little bit more of a balanced attack. He wants the ability to be physical at times, knowing the weather situation in Buffalo. The competition for targets has increased. Gabe Davis appears to be ready to emerge. Dawson Knox has grown his game. Isaiah McKenzie and Jamison Crowder are going to share slot duties. James Cook was the best pass-catching back in the 2021 draft. You have Stephon Diggs coming out this week clamoring for OBJ to sign with the Bills. There's just a ton of mouths to feed here with less possible passes being attempted by Josh Allen. And remember, Diggs was healthy for all 17 games last season and caught 103 passes. We know this is an attrition sport. Buffalo's also favored in all 17 games this season, so game scripts might not dictate throwing as much along with the head coach. All told, Stephon Diggs under 99.5 receptions this season.
There's fantasy managers all over counting on him to be wide receiver 1, and here you go, bursting the bubble for his ability to flirt with Cooper Kupp's 140 ridiculous receptions.
He can still be a wide receiver 1. He's certainly due for some touchdown regression to the positive manner if you look at some of the data. But might not have as many catches.
You can tell the people what they don't want to hear, that you think there's a chance that Gabe Davis can be put up comparable numbers and he's available 4 to 5 rounds later in the draft.
There's just a lot of dudes here. Like, the weapons are plentiful. But it's about game script being favored in 17 games. It's about a head coach that wants to run the ball a little bit more. We know the weather conditions in Buffalo can be windy. There's a lot of things going for this one.
No doubt. There are so many elements to it. And again, to kind of reiterate what Payne said, we appreciate all of you guys that have been with us throughout the course of this preseason. We started the preview podcast for college football earlier than ever and want to encourage you guys to go back and listen to some of those. Let them serve as a refresher. We know the NFL stuff is what a lot of you come for, first and foremost, and we're looking forward to another tremendous season. And just a reminder, this Thursday will be the first college football podcast. Next week, we'll have a little bit of a unique schedule as well. And then a couple short weeks, we'll return to normal recording with the NFL coming on Monday, college football coming on Wednesday with our biggest off-season acquisition in Brad Powers jumping into the Bet the Board family as a college football analyst. And then, of course, arguably our most listened to show each week, the Thursday NFL edition. So with all of that in mind, again, sign up, bettheboardcontest.com. Take advantage of the give back that we have planned for you guys this season. And with a Stephon Diggs prop in your clutches, hopefully we'll see you at the window.
Thanks for listening to Bet the Board. You can catch Todd and Payne every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday during football season, breaking down the biggest NFL and college football games. And to make sure you don't miss any free best bets, subscribe to Bet the Board on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.